Olivia had always prided herself on her ability to read people. As a successful editor at one of the most prestigious publishing houses in the bustling metropolis, her keen eye for detail and intuition had served her well. Yet on that fateful Tuesday evening, she realized how blind she had been to the deception unfolding in her own home. The day had started like any other. Olivia had risen early, kissed her husband Renato goodbye as he left for his law firm, and headed to the office. She had spent the day poring over manuscripts, attending meetings, and planning the launch of their next bestseller. It was not until she returned home, earlier than usual due to a canceled dinner with a potential author, that her world began to unravel. The house was quiet when she entered, the silence broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioner. Olivia had kicked off her heels and padded towards the bedroom, intent on changing into something more comfortable before starting dinner. As she approached, she heard muffled sounds coming from behind the closed door. Her hand had hesitated on the doorknob, a sudden, inexplicable dread washing over her. When she finally pushed the door open, the scene before her eyes had shattered her reality in an instant. Renato, her husband of 7 years, was entangled with another woman on their marital bed. The woman, whom Olivia recognized as Renato's young paralegal, had let out a startled cry. Renato had jumped up, his face a mask of shock and guilt. Time seemed to stand still as Olivia stood frozen in the doorway, her mind struggling to process the betrayal unfolding before her. The room spun, and she had gripped the doorframe for support, her knuckles turning white with the effort. In the hours that followed, Olivia had moved through a haze of disbelief and pain. She had watched, detached, as Renato fumbled for explanations and apologies. The paralegal had fled, leaving behind only the lingering scent of her perfume and the weight of unspoken words. As night fell, Olivia found herself alone in their living room, staring out at the twinkling lights of the city below. The life she had carefully built over the years now lay in ruins around her. Questions swirled in her mind, each more painful than the last. How long had this been going on? How many times had she been made a fool? What would this mean for their future? The vibration of her phone pulled her from her thoughts. It was a reminder for her upcoming business trip to a literary conference in a coastal city. In that moment, the trip took on a new significance. It was no longer just a professional obligation, but a lifeline, an escape from the suffocating reality of her crumbling marriage. As she began to pack, methodically folding clothes and gathering documents, Olivia made a decision. She would go on this trip, not just to fulfill her work commitments, but to gain the distance she desperately needed. She needed time to think, to breathe, to decide what came next. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on her as she zipped up her suitcase. Olivia had no idea what awaited her in the coastal city or what she would return to in her hometown. All she knew was that nothing would ever be the same again. The coastal city embraced Olivia with its warm, salty air as she stepped out of the taxi in front of her hotel. The sun had just begun to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink that reflected off the nearby ocean. Despite the beauty surrounding her, Olivia felt numb, her mind still reeling from the events of the past few days. After checking in and mechanically unpacking her suitcase, Olivia found herself drawn to the hotel bar. The soft lighting and gentle murmur of conversations promised a temporary respite from her tumultuous thoughts. She had not planned on drinking, but as she settled onto a bar stool, she found herself ordering a glass of wine. As Olivia sipped her drink, she became aware of a presence beside her. A man had taken the seat next to hers, his cologne a subtle mix of citrus and wood. When she glanced over, she met a pair of intense green eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed facade. The man introduced himself as Gabriel, a writer attending the same literary conference. His voice was deep and melodious, with a hint of an accent Olivia could not quite place. Despite her initial reluctance, Olivia found herself drawn into conversation with Gabriel. His wit and charm slowly chipped away at the walls she had erected around herself. As the night wore on, Olivia discovered in Gabriel an unexpected confidant. Without divulging the details of her marital troubles, she found herself opening up about her feelings of betrayal and loss. Gabriel listened intently, offering neither judgment nor hollow platitudes. Instead, he shared his own experiences with heartbreak and the healing power of new beginnings. The hours slipped by unnoticed as they talked, laughed, and shared stories. Olivia felt a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the wine she had consumed. For the first time since discovering Renato's infidelity, she felt seen and understood. It was well past midnight when Gabriel suggested they take a walk along the moonlit beach. Olivia hesitated for a moment, her wedding ring suddenly feeling heavy on her finger. But the pull of Gabriel's gentle smile and the promise of forgetting her troubles, if only for a little while, proved too strong to resist. Their bare feet sank into the cool sand as they strolled along the water's edge. The rhythmic sound of the waves seemed to wash away Olivia's pain and confusion, replacing it with a heady mix of excitement and desire. When Gabriel's hand brushed against hers, she did not pull away. Their first kiss was tentative, a question asked and answered in the space of a heartbeat. The second was more urgent, years of pent-up passion and newly discovered freedom pouring out in a single moment. Olivia's world narrowed to the feeling of Gabriel's arms around her and the taste of salt on his lips. They stumbled back to Gabriel's hotel room, hands exploring and clothes discarded along the way. In the darkness of the unfamiliar room, Olivia gave herself over to sensation, allowing the heat of Gabriel's touch to burn away the last of her hesitation. As dawn broke over the horizon, Olivia lay awake, watching the play of early morning light across Gabriel's sleeping form. The weight of her actions settled over her like a heavy blanket. She had never imagined herself capable of infidelity. Yet here she was, in a stranger's bed, her wedding ring lying forgotten on the nightstand. Olivia slipped out of bed, gathering her clothes silently. As she dressed, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman who stared back at her was both familiar and strange, changed in ways she was only beginning to understand. With one last look at Gabriel's peaceful face, Olivia left the room, closing the door softly behind her. As she walked back to her own hotel, the city coming to life around her, Olivia felt a complex mix of emotions. Guilt and exhilaration warred within her, along with a newfound sense of possibility. She did not know what the future held or how she would face Renato upon her return home. For now, she allowed herself to exist in this moment of temporary escape, carrying with her the memory of a night that had shaken the foundations of everything she thought she knew about herself. The journey back to her hometown felt longer than Olivia remembered. As the landscape outside the train window shifted from coastal views to urban sprawl, she found herself grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. The weight of her wedding ring, which she had slipped back on before leaving the coastal city, seemed to grow heavier with each passing mile. During the conference, Olivia had thrown herself into work, attending every session and networking event possible. She had deliberately avoided Gabriel after their night together, ignoring his attempts to reach out. The distance and busy schedule had given her time to reflect, and she had come to a decision. She would fight for her marriage. As the train pulled into the station, Olivia steeled herself for what lay ahead. She had texted Renato, informing him of her arrival time, but had not communicated beyond that. The uncertainty of what awaited her at home both terrified and steeled her resolve. Stepping off the train, Olivia spotted Renato immediately. He stood on the platform, a bouquet of her favorite flowers in hand, his face a mixture of hope and apprehension. As their eyes met, Olivia felt a surge of conflicting emotions: anger, hurt, longing, and a flicker of something that might have been love. The car ride home was tense, filled with awkward small talk and long stretches of silence. Renato attempted to broach the subject of their relationship several times, but Olivia deflected, stating she needed time to settle in before they had any serious discussions. Once home, the familiar surroundings brought a fresh wave of pain as Olivia remembered the scene she had walked in on just over a week ago. She unpacked methodically, using the mundane task to gather her thoughts and prepare for the conversation she knew they needed to have. As evening fell, Olivia and Renato found themselves seated at opposite ends of their living room couch. The distance between them seemed both insurmountable and too close all at once. Renato spoke first, his voice thick with emotion as he poured out apologies and explanations. He spoke of momentary weakness, of feeling disconnected and underappreciated, of the immense regret that had consumed him since Olivia had discovered his infidelity. Olivia listened silently, her face an impassive mask that betrayed none of the turmoil within. As Renato's words washed over her, she found herself thinking of Gabriel and the night they had shared. The guilt she felt warred with a sense of justification, complicating her emotions further. When Renato finished speaking, he looked at Olivia with pleading eyes, begging for a second chance. He promised therapy, both individual and couples counseling. He swore to be more present, more attentive, to rebuild the trust he had shattered. His words were earnest, his remorse palpable. Olivia took a deep breath, carefully considering her response. She acknowledged Renato's apology and expressed her own pain and sense of betrayal. She spoke of the work it would take to rebuild their relationship, if that was even possible. She did not mention Gabriel or her own lapse in fidelity, the weight of that secret settling in her chest like a stone. As the night wore on, Olivia and Renato tentatively agreed to try and salvage their marriage. They set ground rules for the coming weeks and months: separate bedrooms, scheduled date nights, and a commitment to complete honesty moving forward. The irony of this last promise was not lost on Olivia, but she pushed the thought aside, focusing instead on the path ahead. When they finally retired for the night, Olivia lay awake in the guest bedroom, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling. The decision to fight for her marriage felt both right and somehow hollow. As she drifted off to sleep, her mind wandered to the coastal city and the brief escape she had found there. She wondered if she had made the right choice, or if she was simply delaying the inevitable. The road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. Olivia knew that saving her marriage would require not only forgiveness, but also confronting the cracks in their relationship that had existed long before Renato's infidelity. As sleep finally claimed her, Olivia's last conscious thought was a question she had no answer for. In trying to save her marriage, would she lose herself in the process? 2 months had passed since Olivia's return, and a fragile normalcy had settled over her life. She and Renato had been diligently attending couples therapy, slowly rebuilding the trust that had been shattered. While progress was evident, Olivia still felt a lingering unease, a sense that something fundamental had shifted in their relationship. It was on a crisp autumn morning that Olivia's world tilted on its axis once again. She had been feeling off for weeks, fatigue, nausea, and a general sense of malaise that she had attributed to the stress of her marital situation. But as she stood in the bathroom, staring at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, a cold wave of panic washed over her. Olivia's mind raced, calculating dates and possibilities. The timing was cruelly ambiguous. Her night with Gabriel in the coastal city had occurred just days before she and Renato had tentatively resumed intimacy. The realization that she could not be certain of the child's paternity hit her like a physical blow. She sank to the cold tile floor, the test clutched in her trembling hands. Olivia had always wanted children, had imagined sharing the joy of pregnancy with Renato. But not like this, not with this cloud of uncertainty and guilt hanging over her. For days, Olivia carried the secret of her pregnancy like a lead weight. She went through the motions of her daily life, working, attending therapy sessions with Renato, even managing to smile and laugh at dinner with friends. But internally, she was in turmoil, grappling with the implications of her situation. Olivia considered her options. She could terminate the pregnancy, sparing herself and Renato the potential heartache and complications. But the thought filled her with an inexplicable sense of loss. She could tell Renato about the pregnancy and her infidelity, risking the fragile progress they had made in their relationship. Or she could remain silent, allowing Renato to believe the child was his, carrying the burden of her secret alone. Each option seemed fraught with potential for pain and regret. Olivia found herself wishing she could turn back time, undo the choices that had led her to this point. But as the days passed and her symptoms became more pronounced, she knew she would have to make a decision soon. One evening, as she and Renato sat in comfortable silence in their living room, Olivia felt the words rising in her throat. She opened her mouth to speak, to confess everything: the pregnancy, her night with Gabriel, her fears and doubts. But at the last moment, she faltered. Renato looked up from his book, noticing her distress, and asked if she was all right. Olivia forced a smile and nodded, the moment passing like a ship in the night. As weeks turned into a month, Olivia's body began to change subtly. She found herself avoiding Renato's touch, fearing he would notice the slight swell of her abdomen. She threw herself into work, using long hours at the office as an excuse for her fatigue and changing moods. In quiet moments alone, Olivia found her thoughts drifting to Gabriel. She had not contacted him since their night together, and he had eventually stopped trying to reach her. Now she wondered about him, where he was, what he was doing, if he ever thought about her. The possibility that he might be the father of her child filled her with a complex mix of emotions she could not fully unravel. As her first prenatal appointment loomed on the horizon, Olivia knew she could not continue in this state of indecision. She would have to face the reality of her situation and make choices that would irrevocably alter the course of multiple lives. The night before her appointment, Olivia lay awake in bed, one hand resting on her stomach. She thought about the life growing inside her, a tangible result of the choices she had made. As dawn broke, casting a soft light through the bedroom window, Olivia made a decision. She would tell Renato about the pregnancy, but not about her uncertainty regarding the father. It was a partial truth, one that filled her with guilt even as she rationalized it as the best way forward. Olivia rose from bed, steeling herself for the conversation ahead. As she walked towards the kitchen, where she could hear Renato preparing breakfast, she felt as though she were standing on the edge of a precipice. Whatever happened next, there would be no going back. The life she had known, the carefully constructed reality she had been clinging to, was about to change forever. 4 months into her pregnancy, Olivia had settled into a new routine. She had told Renato about the baby, and his joy had been palpable. Their relationship, while still fragile, had found a new focus in preparing for their child's arrival. Olivia had pushed thoughts of Gabriel and the paternity question to the back of her mind, choosing instead to immerse herself in work and prenatal preparations. On a bustling Tuesday morning, Olivia arrived at the publishing house where she worked as an editor. The office was abuzz with excitement about a new author who had been signed recently. His manuscript had created quite a stir among the senior editors, and today he would be visiting to discuss his book deal. As Olivia settled at her desk, her assistant knocked on her door, informing her that the meeting with the new author had been moved up, and her presence was requested in the conference room immediately. Gathering her notes, Olivia made her way down the hallway, her mind preoccupied with the day's agenda. The moment Olivia stepped into the conference room, time seemed to stand still. Sitting at the far end of the table, engaged in animated conversation with her colleagues, was Gabriel. Their eyes met, and Olivia felt as though the air had been sucked out of the room. Gabriel's expression shifted from surprise to something more complex, a mix of joy, confusion, and an intensity that made Olivia's heart race. For a moment, she considered turning and fleeing the room, but professionalism won out. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and walked to her seat, nodding a greeting to her colleagues. Throughout the meeting, Olivia struggled to maintain her composure. She found herself hyper-aware of Gabriel's presence. The timbre of his voice as he discussed his novel, the way his hands moved expressively as he spoke, the occasional glances he cast in her direction. She contributed to the discussion mechanically, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. As the meeting drew to a close, Olivia felt a mixture of relief and dread. She knew a private conversation with Gabriel was inevitable, and she was unsure how to handle it. As her colleagues filed out of the room, offering congratulations to Gabriel on his book deal, Olivia busied herself with gathering her papers, avoiding eye contact. Finally, they were alone. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words and shared memories. Gabriel spoke first, his voice soft and tinged with uncertainty. He expressed surprise at seeing her, mentioning that he had not known she worked for this publishing house when he had submitted his manuscript. Olivia responded politely, congratulating him on his book deal. She maintained a professional demeanor, but her heart was pounding so loudly she was sure Gabriel must hear it. As they spoke, The tension in the room was palpable, a mix of attraction and unresolved emotions. Their conversation was interrupted by Olivia's assistant, informing her of her next appointment. Olivia felt a mix of relief and disappointment as she prepared to leave. As she reached the door, Gabriel called out to her, asking if they could meet for coffee to catch up. The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Olivia hesitated, her hand on the doorknob. She thought of Renato, of the baby growing inside her, of the life she had been trying to rebuild. But she also thought of the night she had spent with Gabriel, the connection they had shared, the way he had made her feel understood in a way she had not experienced in years. Finally, Olivia turned to face Gabriel. She saw the hope in his eyes, mixed with a wariness that mirrored her own feelings. She knew that agreeing to meet him would be opening a door she had firmly closed months ago. Yet she found herself nodding, suggesting a cafe near the office for the following day. As Olivia left the conference room, her mind was in turmoil. She had managed to compartmentalize her night with Gabriel, to push it aside as a momentary lapse in judgment. But now, with him back in her life in such an unexpected way, all the emotions and questions she had suppressed came rushing back. Returning to her office, Olivia placed a protective hand over her slightly swollen belly. The baby, a constant reminder of her complicated situation, seemed to stir in response. As she sat at her desk, staring unseeing at her computer screen, Olivia realized that the careful balance she had achieved in her life was once again at risk of toppling. The prospect of meeting Gabriel the next day filled her with a mix of anticipation and dread. She knew that whatever happened, this unexpected reunion had the potential to upend everything. As she tried to focus on her work, Olivia could not shake the feeling that she was standing on the precipice of a life-altering decision, one that would have far-reaching consequences for herself, Renato, Gabriel, and the unborn child she carried. The weeks following Gabriel's unexpected appearance at the publishing house had been a delicate balancing act for Olivia. Her life had become a complex web of half-truths and carefully orchestrated encounters. At home, she maintained the facade of a happily expectant mother, discussing nursery colors with Renato and attending prenatal classes together. At work, she found herself navigating an increasingly complicated relationship with Gabriel, their professional interactions tinged with an undercurrent of unresolved tension. Olivia had managed to keep her pregnancy hidden from Gabriel during their initial meetings, strategically scheduling their encounters in the mornings when her nausea was less pronounced and wearing loose-fitting clothing to disguise her growing bump. She had convinced herself that this deception was necessary, a way to protect both Gabriel and her fragile home life from the potential fallout of the truth. However, as her pregnancy progressed and her body changed more noticeably, Olivia found it increasingly difficult to maintain the charade. She caught Gabriel looking at her with a mix of confusion and suspicion, his eyes lingering on her midsection during their meetings. The weight of her secrets seemed to grow heavier with each passing day, threatening to crush her under their burden. One afternoon, as they were discussing the final edits for Gabriel's manuscript in her office, Olivia noticed a shift in his demeanor. He had been more distracted than usual, his responses to her suggestions curt and unfocused. As she reached across the desk to hand him a stack of papers, her blouse pulled tight across her abdomen, and she saw Gabriel's eyes widen in recognition. The silence that followed was deafening. Gabriel's gaze remained fixed on Olivia's midsection, a myriad of emotions flashing across his face: surprise, hurt, anger, and something that looked unsettlingly like hope. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled, but Olivia could hear the underlying tension. Gabriel asked how far along she was, his tone making it clear that he had already done the mental calculations. Olivia felt her carefully constructed world begin to crumble around her. She attempted to deflect, to change the subject back to his manuscript, but Gabriel was relentless in his questioning. As Gabriel pressed for answers, Olivia found herself trapped in a web of her own making. She could see the hurt and betrayal in his eyes as he pieced together the timeline of her pregnancy. The possibility that he might be the father hung unspoken between them, a specter that threatened to upend both of their lives. Olivia's mind raced, searching for a way to navigate this treacherous conversation without revealing the full extent of her uncertainty. She found herself falling back on the partial truths she had been telling for months. Yes, she was pregnant. Yes, she and Renato were expecting. No, she had not known when they had met at the conference. But Gabriel was not easily placated. He pressed for more details, his questions becoming increasingly pointed. Olivia could see the moment when doubt crept into his eyes, when he began to consider the possibility that the child she carried might be his. The realization seemed to hit him like a physical blow, and Olivia felt a surge of guilt for the pain she saw etched on his face. As Gabriel's questioning intensified, Olivia felt her carefully constructed defenses begin to crumble. She found herself teetering on the edge of confession, the truth pushing against her lips, desperate to be spoken. But fear held her back. Fear of losing Renato, of destroying the life she had been trying to rebuild, of facing the consequences of her actions. The tension in the room was palpable as Gabriel waited for Olivia to respond to his unspoken question. She could see the mix of hope and dread in his eyes, the silent plea for honesty warring with the fear of what that honesty might reveal. Olivia opened her mouth to speak, unsure of what would come out when a knock at the door shattered the moment. Her assistant's voice, informing her of her next appointment, provided Olivia with a momentary reprieve. She seized the opportunity, quickly gathering her things and making excuses about deadlines and meetings. As she hurried from the office, she could feel Gabriel's eyes on her, filled with a mixture of hurt, confusion, and determination. In the sanctuary of the elevator, Olivia leaned against the wall, her hand resting protectively over her swollen belly. She knew that this confrontation with Gabriel was only the beginning. The truth, or at least part of it, was now out in the open, and she would have to face the consequences. As the elevator descended, Olivia's mind raced with the implications of what had just transpired. She had managed to avoid giving Gabriel a direct answer, but his suspicions had been aroused. She knew he would not let this go easily, that he would continue to press for answers, for certainty. The doors opened and Olivia stepped out into the lobby, feeling as though she were walking on a tightrope. On one side lay the life she had been trying to salvage with Renato, built on a foundation of half-truths and omissions. On the other, the unknown terrain of acknowledging Gabriel's potential role in her child's life. As she left the building, stepping into the bustling city street, Olivia realized that her carefully constructed world of secrets and lies was on the verge of collapse. The question now was not if, but when and how the truth would finally come to light, and what would be left standing in its wake. The tension that had been building between Olivia and Gabriel finally reached its breaking point on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Olivia had been avoiding Gabriel for days, making excuses and rescheduling meetings, but he had cornered her in the parking garage as she was leaving work. Gabriel's eyes were intense, his jaw set with determination as he confronted Olivia. He demanded answers, his voice low but firm. The possibility that he might be the father of her child had consumed him, and he was no longer willing to let Olivia evade the issue. Olivia tried to maintain her composure, but the stress of the past months had taken its toll. Her hands shook as she clutched her bag, her eyes darting around the dimly lit garage, looking for an escape. But Gabriel was relentless. He laid out the timeline, pointing out the overlap between their night together and her pregnancy. He asked pointed questions about paternity tests and her plans for the future. As Olivia stammered through vague responses, Gabriel's frustration grew. Finally, he delivered his ultimatum. His voice was cold as he informed Olivia that if she did not come clean about their affair and the possibility of his paternity, he would go to Renato himself. The threat hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Olivia felt as though the ground had dropped out from beneath her feet. The carefully constructed reality she had been maintaining was crumbling, and she found herself at a loss for words. She pleaded with Gabriel, asking for more time, promising to figure things out. But Gabriel remained unmoved. He gave her a deadline, 1 week to tell Renato the truth, or he would do it himself. As Gabriel walked away, leaving Olivia alone in the echoing garage, she felt the full weight of her decisions crashing down upon her. She sat in her car for a long time, her mind racing with possible scenarios, each one seeming more disastrous than the last. Meanwhile, at home, Renato had been grappling with a growing sense of unease. He had noticed subtle changes in Olivia's behavior over the past weeks. Her distraction, her sudden work emergencies, the way she sometimes flinched at his touch. At first, he had attributed it to the stress of pregnancy, but as time went on, a seed of doubt had taken root in his mind. Renato began to pay closer attention to Olivia's comings and goings. He noticed the late nights at the office, the hushed phone conversations that ended abruptly when he entered the room. He found himself checking her phone when she was in the shower, scrolling through her emails when she left her laptop open. One evening, as they sat in silence at the dinner table, Renato broached the subject. His voice was carefully neutral as he asked Olivia about her new author, the one whose book had been causing such a stir at the publishing house. Olivia's reaction, a moment of panic flashing across her face before she composed herself, did not go unnoticed. Renato pressed further, asking innocuous questions about the author's background and the nature of their working relationship. With each question, he watched Olivia grow more uncomfortable, her responses becoming more evasive. The suspicion that had been simmering in the back of his mind began to boil over. As the week progressed, the atmosphere in their home grew increasingly tense. Olivia, caught between Gabriel's ultimatum and Renato's growing suspicions, found herself withdrawing further. She spent more time at work, citing the demands of her job and the upcoming book launch. When she was home, she was distracted and distant, her mind constantly churning with the impossible decision she faced. Renato, for his part, became more overtly suspicious. He began to question Olivia's late nights, to challenge her explanations for missed calls and canceled plans. The trust that they had been slowly rebuilding since her return from the conference seemed to be evaporating, replaced by a miasma of doubt and unspoken accusations. As Gabriel's deadline loomed closer, Olivia felt as though she were standing on the edge of a precipice. She knew that regardless of her choice, her life was about to change irrevocably. The truth, which she had tried so hard to bury, was clawing its way to the surface, threatening to destroy everything she held dear. On the eve of Gabriel's deadline, Olivia sat alone in their darkened living room, one hand resting on her swollen belly. She thought about the child growing inside her, the innocent life that would be affected by whatever choice she made. She thought about Renato, about the life they had built together and the future they had planned. And she thought about Gabriel, about the connection they had shared and the chaos that their one night together had wrought. As the clock ticked relentlessly towards midnight, Olivia knew that the time for half-truths and evasions had passed. She would have to face the consequences of her actions, to lay bare the secrets she had been carrying for so long. With a heavy heart, she reached for her phone, knowing that the call she was about to make would set in motion a chain of events that would alter the course of multiple lives forever. The weight of her decision pressed down on her as she dialed the number, each ring echoing in the silent room. As she waited for an answer, Olivia steeled herself for the conversation ahead, knowing that whatever happened next, there would be no going back. The annual literary gala hosted by the publishing house had always been a highlight of Olivia's professional calendar. This year, however, as she stood in the opulent ballroom of the city's most prestigious hotel, she felt nothing but dread. The weight of her secrets seemed to press down on her, making it difficult to breathe in her elegant black gown. Across the room, Renato mingled with guests, his charming smile never quite reaching his eyes. He had been distant in the days leading up to the event, his suspicions simmering just below the surface. Olivia had sensed the growing tension between them, but had been unable to bring herself to address it directly. Gabriel arrived fashionably late, drawing attention as the publishing house's newest star author. His eyes immediately sought out Olivia, their intensity making her shiver despite the warmth of the crowded room. She had not returned his call on the night of his ultimatum, and the deadline had passed without resolution. The air between them crackled with unspoken words and barely contained emotions. As the evening progressed, Olivia found herself trapped in a delicate dance, trying to maintain her professional composure while navigating the complex web of relationships that threatened to unravel at any moment. She flitted from group to group, her laughter sounding hollow even to her own ears. The tension reached its breaking point during the speeches. Olivia, as one of the senior editors, had been slated to introduce Gabriel to the assembled literary elite. As she took the stage, she felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the microphone, and she stumbled over her words as she began to speak. Halfway through her introduction, Olivia's gaze fell on Renato in the audience. The look of hurt and betrayal in his eyes made her falter. In that moment of hesitation, Gabriel stepped forward, ostensibly to help, but his presence only served to heighten the tension. What happened next unfolded with the inexorable momentum of a Greek tragedy. Gabriel, his patience finally exhausted, chose this public moment to confront Olivia. His voice, low but intense, carried in the sudden hush that had fallen over the room. He demanded answers, asking pointed questions about their relationship and the paternity of her child. Olivia, caught off guard and overwhelmed, struggled to respond. Her silence spoke volumes, and a ripple of shocked whispers spread through the audience. Renato, his face a mask of pain and anger, pushed his way to the stage. The three of them stood there, a tableau of betrayal and unspoken truths as the gala dissolved into chaos around them. Renato's voice, when he finally spoke, was filled with a mixture of hurt and rage. He demanded to know how long the affair had been going on, if the child Olivia carried was even his. His words, sharp as knives, cut through the shocked silence of the ballroom. Olivia, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her, found herself unable to form coherent responses. Tears streamed down her face as she looked from Renato to Gabriel, seeing the pain she had caused reflected in both their eyes. Gabriel, for his part, seemed to realize too late the magnitude of what he had set in motion. His face paled as he watched the destruction of Olivia's marriage play out before the eyes of the entire literary community. As security personnel moved to escort them from the stage, the damage was already done. Phones had been recording, social media was ablaze with speculation, and Olivia knew that by morning, her personal drama would be splashed across every gossip column in the city. In the aftermath of the gala, Olivia found herself alone in the hotel lobby, her professional reputation in tatters and her personal life in ruins. Renato had stormed off, his last words a bitter promise of divorce. Gabriel had tried to approach her, but she had recoiled from his touch, unable to bear the weight of his concern on top of everything else. As she sat there, her glamorous gown now rumpled and tear-stained, Olivia contemplated the wreckage of her life. The truth, which she had tried so hard to contain, had exploded into the open in the worst possible way. She had lost her husband, potentially her job, and any semblance of control over her own narrative. The buzz of her phone drew her attention. Messages and missed calls flooded her screen. Colleagues, friends, even her parents. The story had spread faster than wildfire. Olivia realized that this was only the beginning. She would have to face the consequences of her actions not just in her personal life, but in the court of public opinion as well. As the first rays of dawn began to creep through the hotel windows, Olivia finally stirred from her daze. She placed a protective hand over her swollen belly, feeling the flutter of movement within. In that moment, she made a decision. Whatever came next, whatever battles she would have to fight, she would face them head-on, for herself and for the child she carried. With shaky legs, Olivia rose and made her way out of the hotel. The city was just beginning to wake up, unaware that for her, everything had changed. As she hailed a taxi, Olivia knew that the coming days would be the hardest of her life. But for the first time in months, she felt a strange sense of relief. The truth was out, for better or worse, and now she could finally stop running from it. The taxi pulled away from the curb, carrying Olivia towards an uncertain future. Behind her, the hotel stood silent, the scene of her public unraveling. Ahead lay challenges she could barely imagine. But as the city streets slipped by, Olivia took a deep breath, steeling herself for whatever lay ahead. The truth had come to light, and now she would have to learn to live in its glare. In the days following the disastrous literary gala, Olivia found herself at the center of a maelstrom. The story of her affair and the public confrontation had spread like wildfire through both professional and social circles, leaving a trail of shocked whispers and judgmental stares in its wake. When Olivia finally mustered the courage to return to the publishing house, she was met with a palpable chill. Colleagues who had once greeted her warmly now averted their eyes or offered only curt nods. The silence in the elevator as she rode up to her floor was deafening, filled with unasked questions and unspoken condemnation. In her office, Olivia found a terse email from the company's board of directors requesting her presence at an emergency meeting. The message was couched in professional language, but the underlying threat was clear. Her position, once so secure, now hung by a thread. As she sat through the meeting, facing the stern faces of the board members, Olivia realized the full extent of the damage her actions had caused. Not only had she potentially compromised the reputation of the publishing house, but she had also jeopardized their relationship with both Renato, a respected academic, and Gabriel, their rising star author. The board's decision was swift and unequivocal. Olivia was to take an immediate leave of absence while they assessed the situation. As she packed up her personal belongings under the watchful eye of HR, Olivia felt a sense of unreality wash over her. The career she had worked so hard to build was crumbling before her eyes. Outside of work, Olivia found little respite. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends and acquaintances, their tones ranging from concerned to accusatory. She had always prided herself on her integrity, and now found herself branded as an adulteress, a liar, a homewrecker. Even her parents, who had always been her staunchest supporters, struggled to understand her actions. During a tense phone call, her mother's disappointment was palpable, her father's silence more damning than any words could have been. Amidst this turmoil, Olivia grappled with the most pressing question of all: what to do about her marriage. Renato had not returned to their apartment since the night of the gala, his absence a glaring reminder of the chasm that had opened between them. His lawyer had reached out, cold and professional, to discuss the terms of their separation. Olivia found herself lying awake at night, one hand resting on her swollen belly, torn between her love for Renato and the undeniable connection she felt with Gabriel. The child growing inside her, once a source of joy, now seemed like a ticking time bomb. She knew that a paternity test was inevitable, but feared the results would only bring more pain, regardless of the outcome. As the days turned into weeks, Olivia was forced to confront the harsh realities of her new situation. Her savings, once earmarked for the baby's future, were now being rapidly depleted as she faced the possibility of prolonged unemployment. The stress began to take a physical toll, and her doctor warned her about the potential risks to her pregnancy. In a moment of desperation, Olivia reached out to Gabriel. Their meeting in a quiet cafe was fraught with tension and unspoken recriminations. Gabriel, his own reputation tarnished by the scandal, struggled to offer support while grappling with his own feelings of guilt and responsibility. As they talked, Olivia realized that there were no easy solutions, no way to undo the damage that had been done. The future she had once envisioned, a happy marriage, a successful career, a joyful first-time motherhood, now seemed like a distant dream. Yet, as she felt the baby move within her, Olivia found a reserve of strength she had not known she possessed. She began to understand that while she could not change the past, she still had control over her future. It would not be the future she had planned, but it would be one she would forge on her own terms. With this newfound resolve, Olivia began to take small steps towards rebuilding her life. She sought out a therapist to help her work through her conflicted emotions. She reached out to a former mentor in the publishing industry, swallowing her pride to ask for advice and potential opportunities. Most difficult of all, she arranged a meeting with Renato. In a quiet park, away from prying eyes, they sat on a bench and truly talked for the first time since the night of the gala. There were tears, recriminations, and painful honesty on both sides. While reconciliation seemed impossible, they managed to find a fragile common ground in their concern for the unborn child. As autumn turned to winter, Olivia found herself standing at a crossroads. Her future was uncertain, filled with challenges she had never anticipated. The judgments of others still stung, The consequences of her actions still reverberated through every aspect of her life. But as she stood in her empty apartment, boxes packed around her feet, ready to move to a smaller place she could afford on her own, Olivia felt a glimmer of hope. She had survived the initial storm, had faced the harsh light of truth, and not been entirely broken by it. The path ahead was unclear, fraught with difficult decisions and inevitable hardships. But as Olivia placed a protective hand over her belly, feeling the strong kicks of the life within, she knew one thing with certainty. Whatever came next, she would face it head-on, with honesty and courage. The consequences of her actions had changed the course of her life, but they had not defined its end. That, she realized, was still hers to write. The sterile hospital room was filled with a tense silence as Olivia, Renato, and Gabriel waited for the doctor to return with the paternity test results. The past months had been a whirlwind of emotions, confrontations, and difficult decisions for all of them. As the door finally opened, Olivia felt her heart racing, knowing that this moment would irrevocably change their lives. The doctor's words hung in the air. "Mr. Renato, you are the father of the child." The revelation hit them all like a wave, washing away months of uncertainty and replacing it with a new reality. Olivia's eyes immediately sought Renato's, finding a complex mix of emotions there: relief, joy, and a hint of lingering pain. Gabriel, his face a mask of disappointment and resignation, quietly excused himself from the room, leaving the once married couple to process this new information. In the days that followed, Olivia and Renato had a series of long, honest conversations. They discussed their past, their mistakes, and their future. It became clear that while their romantic relationship had been irreparably damaged, there was still a deep well of respect and care between them. They made a decision that surprised many, to forge a new kind of relationship, not as husband and wife, but as co-parents and friends. Olivia decided to stay in the city, but moved to a small apartment closer to her parents. She resigned from her position at the publishing house, feeling the need for a fresh start. Renato, showing unexpected support, helped her secure a position at a local literary magazine, allowing her to stay connected to the world of books she loved while maintaining a less demanding schedule. As Olivia's due date approached, she and Renato attended parenting classes together. Their interactions, once fraught with tension, gradually evolved into a comfortable companionship. They laughed over their clumsy attempts at diaper changing and shared their fears and hopes for their child's future. On a warm summer evening, Olivia went into labor. Renato was by her side throughout the long hours, offering support and encouragement. As dawn broke, their son entered the world with a powerful cry. Holding the tiny, perfect being in her arms, Olivia felt an overwhelming surge of love and protectiveness. Renato, his eyes glistening with tears, gently stroked his son's cheek. "He's beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Olivia looked up at him, seeing the man she had once loved, now transformed into the father of her child. In that moment, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this point. As they sat together, marveling at their newborn son, Olivia reflected on the tumultuous path that had led to this moment. She thought about the choices she had made, the pain she had caused and endured, and the unexpected way things had turned out. She realized that life rarely follows the script we write for it, but often offers us opportunities for growth and redemption if we're brave enough to take them. Renato, sensing her introspection, gently took her hand. "We've been through so much," he said softly, "but look at what we've created. He deserves the best of both of us." Olivia nodded, squeezing his hand in return. "I never imagined we'd end up here," she admitted, "but I'm grateful that we found a way to make it work, for him." As they talked, they reaffirmed their commitment to raising their son in an environment of love and respect, even if it wasn't the traditional family unit they had once envisioned. They discussed their hopes for the future: Renato's continued work in academia, Olivia's plans to eventually write a book about their experiences, and their shared dedication to being the best parents they could be. In the quiet of the hospital room, with their newborn son sleeping peacefully between them, Olivia and Renato found a new kind of intimacy. It wasn't the passionate love they once shared, but a deeper understanding born of shared experiences, forgiveness, and a mutual commitment to the future. As visitors began to arrive, grandparents, friends, colleagues, Olivia watched Renato proudly introducing their son. She realized that while their journey had been far from easy, it had led them to a place of honesty and authenticity in their relationship that they might never have achieved otherwise. The future stretched out before them, full of challenges and joys. Olivia knew there would be difficult days ahead as they navigated co-parenting and redefined their relationships. But as she held her son close, feeling Renato's supportive presence beside her, she felt ready to face whatever came next. This wasn't the happily ever after she had once dreamed of, but it was real, honest, and full of possibility. As she drifted off to sleep, exhausted but content, Olivia's last thoughts were of gratitude. For second chances, for the capacity to forgive and be forgiven, and for the unexpected ways love can transform and endure.